Alright guys, so picking up from where we left off, coming out of the issues of John Brown's raid, we have an election in 1860, and we have four guys running. The Republicans will go ahead and nominate Abraham Lincoln. The Democrats, though, are going to split their decisions here, with the Northern Democrats supporting Stephen Douglas, and the Southern Democrats choosing to move away from him over his statements he made in the debates, and they choose John Breckinridge, who had been Vice President of the United States under James Buchanan. The compromise candidate is the Constitutional Union Party, and they nominate John Bell, but he really doesn't do well. This election, Lincoln does not win a majority of the popular vote, but he does win enough of the electoral vote, a majority there, to become President of the United States, winning every free state.
A virtual unknown before his election, Abraham Lincoln had risen from humble origins.
Lincoln was born in a log cabin. Lincoln was born in poverty, but it was something that he was not particularly proud of. He did not talk about it. He certainly didn't try to make it a selling point.
He also had little political experience. He had served in the House of Representatives in the 1840s, but was defeated after only a single term when he was one of a few to oppose the Mexican-American War.
Very hard to imagine anybody with less administrative experience than Lincoln. He'd managed a law office with about 3 clerks, and that was it.
I think the Republican Party gravitated toward Lincoln in 1860, one, because he was somewhat of a more moderate politician. Lincoln also had the advantage of coming from the Midwest, and the Republican Party really had their eye on capturing the Midwest in the presidential contest.
November 1860. All across the country, people trekked to the ballot box. In one of the largest electoral turnouts up to that point, 81% of all eligible voters cast their votes. In the 20th century, most presidential elections would fail to draw more than 65%. Lincoln swept the entire North from New England to the upper Midwest, but didn't receive a single popular vote from 9 southern states. He squeaked into office as the 16th president, but his victory proved to be the death knell for the Union.
People saying just your election alone is evidence that the North has broken the bargain on which it shares the interests of all the states. The North has used its population growth to arrogantly say, we don't care about your opinions.
There's no question that it was the election of Lincoln and the fact that Lincoln would not allow for the expansion of slavery that first led South Carolina to secede 1 month after Lincoln was elected.
South Carolina seceded in December of 1860. 6 more southern states would follow before Lincoln even took the oath of office in March of 1861. The nation was officially divided.
So Lincoln looks around and he says, we have inherited the world's greatest democracy. The monarchies of the world are looking to see, is it possible for a great democracy to survive? If we start breaking apart, it's not just the United States that's going to suffer. It's going to be the course of democracy around the world.
Southern states now believe they have no voice in government. They think Lincoln is an abolitionist and that slavery will be abolished completely. And in December of 1860, the state of South Carolina becomes the first state to secede from the Union. Other states will end up following them for a total of 7 at the outset. They will, in February, form the Confederate States of America, and in March have a written constitution, and they'll nominate and choose Jefferson Davis, a Mississippi senator, to be their president of what they believe is their new nation. Now, Lincoln, in his inaugural address, called for peace from the southern states.
In your hands, my dissatisfied countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature.
Lincoln was overwhelmed by his early days in the White House. There was a constant parade of office seekers, and he had only 2 secretaries to help him handle all the business. His work consumed him, usually starting as early as 6 in the morning and lasting past 11 at night, with the rare break for a meal or fresh air. The busy new president would table any decisive action regarding secession.
He said immediately he was not recognizing this new emerging Confederacy as a legitimate nation or a real opponent. It was a revolt among dissatisfied people. This was Lincoln's putting his big toe into the water of executive power for the first time. But he had such a big foot, it made an enormous splash.
There's a company of Union soldiers that occupy Fort Sumter in April 1861. And within a month of Lincoln taking office, if he tries to resupply the soldiers in Fort Sumter, well, how's he going to do it? People of South Carolina claim, well, this is our property now.
Lincoln didn't back down, but he also didn't engage. He opted to send provisions, not reinforcements, putting the decision to fire the first shot on the secessionists and their president, Jefferson Davis. Davis didn't hesitate, considering the move an act of war.
So at that point, Jefferson Davis demands that the soldiers who are in Fort Sumter surrender. They refuse to surrender, and at that point, Confederate troops fire on Fort Sumter.
Lincoln could now claim war had been forced upon him.
Lincoln also has to deal with the fact that the South has surrounded federal institutions, in particular Fort Sumter, and are threatening to fire on the fort. Now, Lincoln decides not to resupply the fort with weapons, but sends only food, leaving the Confederates to decide whether to start the war. Jefferson Davis orders them to fire, and within 34 hours the fort is surrendered, but now Lincoln has the argument that we were fired on first. Now, this issue of whether the war was avoidable or not has been debated by most historians, but in general we tend to believe at this point that this war was bound to happen, that there was just no way to solve it with compromising more because that had been tried before. Thanks guys for paying attention. Hopefully you took good notes, and we'll see you tomorrow.